Boy George was born George Allen O'Dowd at Barnehurst Hospital, Kent, England, on 14 June 1961 and raised in Eltham, the second of 5 children born to builder Gerry O'Dowd, born Jeremiah, 1932–2004, and Dinah O'Dowd, born Christina Glynn, 1939–13 March 2023. He was raised in a working-class Irish Catholic family. His father was born in England of Irish descent and his mother is from Dublin. He has one older brother Kevin, as well as 2 younger brothers Gerald and David and a younger sister Siobhán. Boy George also has an older half-brother Richard, who was born out of wedlock in Dublin in 1957 when his mother was just 18. She moved to London with him to start a new life and escape the stigma of being an unmarried mother. Boy George has compared his family history to a sad Irish song. His maternal grandmother was permanently taken from her family at age 6 after being found outside the family home alone, and placed into an industrial school. His great-uncle Thomas Bryan was executed by the British in 1921 during the Irish War of Independence. According to Boy George's mother, who published a memoir in 2007, Gerry O'Dowd was physically and mentally abusive and beat her even when she was pregnant with Boy George. Boy George said of his father, "He was a terrible father and a terrible husband." In 1995, Boy George's youngest brother Gerald, who has schizophrenia, was convicted of killing his wife in an episode of paranoia. Boy George was a follower of the New Romantic movement, which was popular in the UK in the early 1980s. He lived in various squats around Warren Street in central London. He and his friend Marilyn were regulars at Blitz, a London nightclub run by Steve Strange and Rusty Egan. The pop artists that inspired him were Susie and the Banshees, Roxy Music, Patti Smith and the 2 major glam rock pioneers, David Bowie, and T-Rex frontman Mark Bolan. On the impact of Bolan and Bowie on him, Boy George states, "They represented a kind of bohemian existence that I, at that point, could only imagine living. I loved the music. The first time I ever saw Mark Bolan really, properly was singing Metal Guru, and just loved him. I don't think you can separate an artist from what they wear or what they sing. It's kind of the complete package. It's something which is very organic and individual." In the 1980s, much was made of Boy George's androgynous appearance, and there was speculation about his sexuality. When asked by Joan Rivers in an interview on her show in 1983, "Do you prefer men or women?" Boy George replied, "Oh, both." In 1985, when asked by Barbara Walters about his sexual orientation, Boy George said he was bisexual and had various girlfriends and boyfriends in the past. He gave a famous, oft-quoted response to interviewer Russell Harty that he preferred a nice cup of tea to sex. In his 1995 autobiography Take It Like a Man, Boy George stated that he was actually gay, not bisexual, and that he had secret relationships with punk rock singer Kirk Brandon and Culture Club drummer John Moss. He stated many of the songs he wrote for Culture Club were about his relationship with Moss. In a 2008 documentary Living with Boy George, he talked about his first realization he was gay, when he first told his parents, and why men fall in love with one another as well as with women. As 2 of the biggest androgynous stars in music, Boy George and Annie Lennox appeared on the cover of Smash Hits magazine in December 1983, followed by the cover of Newsweek magazine in January 1984. Concurrently with developing his career as a DJ in the late 1990s, Boy George adopted a macrobiotic diet, which he had been attempting to follow since 1988. In 2001, he published the Karma Cookbook, a macrobiotic cookbook co-written with Dragana Brown, whom Boy George met in 1986. By 2014, Boy George had become a raw vegan after years of occasionally trying the diet. Boy George appeared on an episode of BBC television genealogy series Who Do You Think You Are? In 2018, on which it was revealed that he was related to executed Irish revolutionary Thomas Bryan, a member of the Forgotten Ten. As of 2012, Boy George has credited his practice of Nichiren Buddhism and chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo for his newfound spiritual strength to remain sober. Boy George has said, "I'm Catholic in my complications and Buddhist in my aspirations." Boy George has multiple tattoos, including a Christian cross on the side of his face and a Jewish Star of David tattooed on the top of his head. He has a tattoo of David Bowie on his right arm and one of Mark Bolan on his left. Boy George said in 2013 he was quite drunk when his head was shaved and tattooed. He said when he stopped drinking alcohol he lost the desire to have further tattoos on his head, finding it too painful. By the late 1980s, Boy George had been struggling with heroin addiction for several years. He attempted to perform concerts while under its influence. Addictions to other drugs soon followed. Determined to save Boy George's life, his younger brother David made an appearance on UK national television and discussed Boy George's drug habit, which Boy George had been publicly denying at that time. In 1986, Boy George was arrested for heroin possession as part of Operation Culture. In 1986, keyboardist Michael Rudetsky, who co-wrote the song Sexuality on Culture Club's From Luxury to Heartache album, was found dead of a heroin overdose in Boy George's London home. Boy George's friend, Mark Valtier, died after an overdose of methadone and Valium at a party. In December 1986, another friend, Mark Golding, died of an overdose, with Scotland Yard police stating there was no suggestion of foul play during this period. Boy George decided to seek treatment for his addiction. In 1995, Kirk Brandon sued Boy George for libel, claiming that Boy George mentioned a love affair between them in Boy George's autobiography, Take It Like a Man. Boy George won the court case and Brandon was ordered to pay £200,000 to Virgin Records, EMI Virgin Music and the book publisher in costs. Brandon declared himself bankrupt, which resulted in Boy George paying over £20,000 in legal fees. On 7 October 2005, Boy George was arrested in Manhattan on suspicion of cocaine possession and falsely reporting a burglary. Boy George denied that the drugs were his. In court on 1 February 2006, the cocaine possession charge was dropped and Boy George pleaded guilty to falsely reporting a burglary. He was sentenced to 5 days of community service, fined $1,000 and ordered to attend a drug rehabilitation program. On 17 June 2006, a Manhattan judge issued a warrant for the arrest of Boy George after he failed to appear in court for a hearing on why Boy George wanted to change his sentence for the false burglary report. Boy George's attorney informed the court that he had advised Boy George not to appear at that hearing. On 14 August 2006, Boy George reported to the New York City Department of Sanitation for his court-ordered community service. As a result of the intense media coverage, he was allowed to finish his community service inside the sanitation department grounds.